How We Won by Charlotte T. Zitlow, Chapter 13. Figuring It All Out. The Chicago Tribune ran an article on November 1st in advance of the first municipal election in the country to test the 26th Amendment. They reported a number of incorrect points. They suggested that fewer than half of the 30,000 students voted. The actual number was no more than 500. The unusual candidate, as they described him, Brian de St. Croix, was not, as they stated, the director of the Community Action Program. The community, they described, is conservative, with no basis for that description. The coverage was surprisingly inaccurate. 2 days later, on November 3rd, the day after the election, the Tribune ran an article, GOP Swept Out in Bloomington, Indiana. Of 21,491 registered voters, the Tribune noted that 11,829 ballots were cast for mayor. That was over 50% of the electorate. By contrast, in the previous mayoral election, 1968, only about 8,000 votes were cast. The Tribune also mentioned that Mrs. Charlotte Zitlow, a mother of four and first woman to sit on the council, was elected, and that the sole successful Republican council member was Jack Morrison, winning in a low-income area. For the record, I'm the mother of two and was, in fact, the third woman on the council. Jane Homestead was in office in 1943 and Alice Woolery in 1946. Also, the last city election was in 1967, not 1968. Other items may have been mistaken, too. What happened was the question on the street. For those who had not been closely involved, Ed Tracy, chair of the Democratic Party and a supporter of Tom Lemon in the spring primary, said he was not surprised. He had predicted a 2,400 vote margin for Frank McCloskey weeks before. The margin was 2,565. Tracy and Dale Brickner, the Democratic campaign coordinator, were analytical that fateful Tuesday night about the reasons for the sweep. HT reporter Greg Dawson summed up their insights. Party organization and keener perception of Bloomington's ideological slant were the reasons for the win. Tracy said that one thing we learned is that anyone who wants to run in Monroe County has got to be a liberal. Brickner, on the other hand, stressed that the organization had been outstanding throughout and nonstop until the polls closed. He said the Republicans made a fatal mistake when they declared that they would challenge student voters, thereby rousing hundreds who might not have turned out. And he described the Republican organization as nothing compared to the Democrats. Furthermore, he was pleased that, as he said, the Democrats stuck to the issues. My philosophy is keep beating on the issues and leave the personalities alone. He went on, I think this may be the end of charismatic politics. Of course it wasn't. There was a great deal of speculation both at home and at a distance. The Indiana Daily Student ran an editorial, Demos Credit Win to Organization, with Brickner pointing to the excellent Get Out the Vote effort. This would not have succeeded if there had not been months of legwork preceding it. Doug Hatton, Republican campaign coordinator, acknowledged that the Republicans had used their usual organization on Election Day. They did very little door-to-door and did not focus on registering voters. Their hope, they suggested, was that students would not vote. They did more than just hope. They actively strategized to discourage student votes for Democrats by throwing together the Students for Hooker group, but also announced their intent to challenge students who wanted to vote. The combination, Hatton felt, backfired. It just increased interest in the campaign and irritated students and other voters. Although not much was made of it at the time, the voter turnout was the highest in Bloomington history. Enthusiasm was palpable, and the mayor-elect simply said, it was the people of Bloomington that wanted a change. Both Brickner and Hatton agreed that the slate of council candidates played a big role as well. In McCloskey's words, the council candidates were the best in the history of Bloomington. James Root, a seasoned HT staff writer, offered insights into the political shift that was happening before everyone's eyes, but being seen by too few. He noted that the 1970 election, which established 3 Democrats in county administrative offices and a Democratic majority in the county council, was the harbinger of things to come. The courthouse had previously been totally dominated by Republicans. Mayor-elect McCloskey, Root reported, had often said, it used to be said, that only time a Democrat got in the courthouse, it was when he had to pay his taxes. Things were changing, Root pointed out, that while the Democrats had had a fierce primary in 1971, and while some Democrats were not supporting McCloskey, the party had managed to put together a very effective organization. At the same time, the rift between the Republican Party persisted. Root continued, they carried on what has become a traditional intra-party fight. The GOP faces a lot of fence mending if it is to steer from a course apparently more concerned with baiting fellow Republicans instead of opposing Democrats. Root foresaw increasing gains by Democrats in county government without this change of focus pointing to the possible increase of Democratic power, a commissioner seat, and a new judgeship in the 1972 election. But he admonished, before Democrats start gloating over such a prospect, they might learn from Republicans that political success can cause problems. He points to a growing lack of city-county cooperation, for example. Political domination, it seems, tends to provide a basis for in-party disharmony. There was a lesson here, he suggested, that the Republicans failed to learn. Solving community problems, or not, can be the basis of citizen revolt. He quoted Dick Fee, who lost his seat by around 500 votes. The people just wanted to throw we rascals out. Root concluded that for the moment, Democrats have the rosiest future, but he warned that they haven't had time to make mistakes, and that will be the proof of the pudding. The pundits and the reporters apparently failed to notice several other major factors. The nonpartisan, issue-oriented group Citizens for Good Government printed a carefully worded list of preferences in the election, based on the substantive questions and answers they had pursued with each candidate in person. They also took out half-page ads with their recommendations in both newspapers. Yellow flyers had been hand-distributed throughout the city by the Voters' Union. They played a significant, if unacknowledged, role. Many voters in every election expressed frustration at not knowing enough about the candidates or their position on issues. That was especially true with a full slate of unknown candidates on the Democratic ticket. It was also true, however, for the incumbents, to whom little scrutiny had been given over the years of positions they had taken or methods they had employed to serve the people. The VU had interviewed candidates, talked to them about their view of the roles in government and their views on issues, and had summarized all their words and records in a succinct fashion. Dale Brickner did not mention the VU piece, but it was an elegant example of his basic premise. It dealt only with the issues and not with personalities. To voters, the majority of whom were still reluctant to adopt a party label, it was a very informative piece. The endorsements of all the newspapers and other community leaders of their friends in city government carried little weight vis-a-vis this thoughtful, well-researched piece. It played a part for many voters as they went to the polls carrying their yellow sheets for reference. Small armies of volunteers spread out throughout the city, knocking on virtually every voter's door. This personal touch, followed up by the flyers and supplemented by small groups, coffees, teas, meetings with neighborhood associations, wherever they were allowed to speak, was unmatched by any effort of the Republicans. Without a doubt, the landslide was a culmination of all these factors and more. The first chapters of this book survey the seismic changes in Bloomington's makeup and culture. These specific candidates were in the right place at the right time to bring a relatively quiet but sustainable revolution here.